I had coffee last week with an old friend, and if you looked at her social media, you'd think her life was just this flawless victory lap.
Hmm.
Her career looks like a straight vertical line of promotions and wins, always these photos of smiling, confident team. She's the person everyone from our graduating class points to as, like, the one who made it. But sitting across from me, she was telling me about her latest big project, hitting all the expected talking points. Then she just stopped, mid-sentence. She just stared into her cup for a moment and said, almost in a whisper, honestly, the 2 years leading up to this were a complete disaster. And as she started talking about the dead ends, the burnout, the version of the project that completely failed, what struck me wasn't the struggle itself, it was the apology in her voice. She spoke about it like she was confessing some shameful secret, constantly glancing up as if expecting me to see her differently now. That moment, seeing the gap between the polished success she projected and the intense shame she felt about the journey, it made me realize something. We have the vocabulary to celebrate a victory, but we have almost no language for the messy, difficult, and often embarrassing process of ever getting there. Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take a whole stack of information and really pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge or insight, giving you a shortcut to being truly well informed. Today, we're diving deep into exactly what my friend experienced, this profound societal pressure to hide her struggles, to present only the highlight reel. And we're exploring the incredible transformative power of vulnerability when we embrace the entire journey, not just the shiny destination. So our central question for this deep dive is really, why do we feel so much shame about the journey when the journey itself is where all the growth actually happens?
That's such a powerful story to start with. And it really resonates, doesn't it? Because it taps into something so deeply ingrained in our culture. We're conditioned pretty much from day one to equate success with this kind of effortless perfection. The narrative we're constantly fed, and the one we often end up feeding others, is that people just arrive at greatness. You don't see the false starts, the exhaustion, or those moments of crippling self-doubt that frankly define the process for most people. This success-only mindset, it really shapes how we see ourselves and how we interact with the world. It pushes us towards that polished highlight reel you mentioned. And often there's a significant personal cost to that. So today, we're going to explore why this happens and maybe more importantly, what we can actually do to shift this perspective, both for ourselves and, within our communities to really embrace that rich, messy middle.
It's fascinating, isn't it? My friend, who by any external measure is incredibly successful, still carried this deep shame about the disaster years that got her there. It really makes you wonder, why do we feel this overwhelming need to hide? What is it about showing our struggles that feels so, I don't know, dangerous?
Well, it stems from the immense societal implications of this whole success-only narrative. When we're under this relentless pressure to present a perfect image, it can create what some researchers call a chasm of despair for individuals. And this isn't just about superficial appearances. It goes much deeper. It genuinely impacts our mental health and our overall well-being. Imagine the constant internal pressure. You're trying to uphold an illusion that just doesn't match your reality. So you're fighting this battle inside, keeping up a facade for the world while wrestling with anxiety, burnout, and this really profound sense of isolation. You feel like nobody else really gets what you're going through, and that feeling. It can be incredibly lonely. We can see this really vividly in the story of a young woman named Hana, who lived in Tokyo. If you looked at her social media, her life seemed utterly flawless, just perfect. Her feed was this curated tapestry, right? Beautifully arranged bento boxes, glowing reviews from her freelance design clients, smiling photos with friends in chic cafes. It was pure, effortless success, not a wrinkle in sight. But, as we often find out, the reality behind the screen can be, vastly different. Picture Hannah in her small apartment, literally surrounded by dozens of failed design drafts, fighting back tears of exhaustion and anxiety. She was deep in what you might call a lonely season, feeling that immense pressure to only show the highlights, never the struggle. The gap between her carefully curated online self and her true struggling self had become this profound chasm of despair, quietly eating away at her.
Oh, the perfect bento box illusion. I mean, it's so incredibly relatable, isn't it? Especially with social media constantly feeding us these idealized, almost airbrush versions of other people's lives. It feels like everyone's competing for the most effortlessly fabulous life award. And the pressure to keep up appearances online, it can be just crushing. You end up comparing your raw, unedited backstage reality to everyone else's perfectly staged highlight reel. It's exhausting.
Absolutely. And that comparison, it's a thief of joy, definitely, and creator of shame. But then one night, something shifted for Hana. After a client harshly rejected a project she'd poured her soul into, she felt something just break inside her. A moment of complete exhaustion and frustration. Instead of posting another success story, she did something truly raw and vulnerable, something that basically defied all the unspoken rules of her online world. She uploaded a photo of her tear-stained sketchbook. You could see the pages filled with crossed-out ideas, crumpled drafts, desperate revisions. And her caption was simple, but incredibly powerful. This is what effort looks like too, and tonight it feels like a failure. I'm tired of pretending it doesn't. That single act, putting up that raw, tear-stained sketchbook photo, it truly pierced a bubble in a way that, honestly, 1,000 perfect photos never could have. What happened next was pretty remarkable. First, a comment popped up, "Thank you for showing this." Then another, "I needed to see this today." And then dozens more comments started flooding in. People didn't just like the post. They started sharing their own stories. Stories of struggle, creative blocks, professional heartbreak, feeling like an imposter. It created this small, impromptu community, built not on shared success, but on shared struggle. And it fostered this kind of empathy and genuine connection that was utterly transformative, not just for Hannah, but for countless others who saw themselves in her honesty.
So the real aha moment here isn't just that being vulnerable makes you feel better, or that it's personally brave, although it is. It's that it actually builds stronger connections and real community in a way that polished perfection never could. It's almost counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah.
We hide our struggles thinking we're protecting ourselves, but it turns out hiding is what isolates us. Showing them, well, that's what actually brings us together.
Precisely. And this really underscores a critical point about mental health. The relentless pressure for this success-only narrative. It chips away at our internal well-being. It fosters feelings of inadequacy, isolation, all that heavy stuff. So maybe true resilience isn't about never falling down. Maybe it's about fostering a culture where it's not just safe, but actually encouraged to admit we fell, to lay bare our struggles, and to find that chorus of voices ready to respond. We're here to help you up. We've been there too. That collective understanding, that's a powerful antidote to the chasm of despair.
Okay, let's unpack this. So it's not just about fake it till you make it. It's about the very real cost to our internal world. That story of Hannah is incredibly powerful on an individual level. It really shows how one person's courage can just ripple outwards. But what about when this vulnerability scales up, particularly in high-stakes environments like, say, the corporate world, especially in leadership roles? Isn't there a risk that in some professional contexts, showing too much struggle could be seen as weakness, not strength? Can leaders really afford to show their messy middle?
That's a really fair question, and it's a common one. And it's precisely where this concept of leader vulnerability becomes even more critically important. In fact, it's gaining significant traction exactly because of its profound effect on teams, especially in fast-paced industries like the IT sector, where quick, efficient, creative problem-solving is absolutely crucial. It directly impacts something called psychological safety, which is basically the bedrock of high-performing teams. I came across this powerful anecdote from a former engineer at a Silicon Valley startup. Let's call the company Aperture. This company had hit a major wall. Their flagship product launch had failed, like spectacularly. The tension in the office was, well, you could cut it with a knife. A dense cloud of fear. Everyone was quietly updating their resumes, bracing for the inevitable layoffs or, the blame game. Their CEO, a guy named David, called an all-hands meeting. The engineer remembered how they all just steeled themselves for the worst, preparing for a stern lecture or some terrible announcement. But what David did next was completely unexpected. Instead of blaming people or announcing cuts, he put up a single slide. And its title, stark against the white screen, was "Where I Went Wrong."
Hey, where I went wrong, slide. Wow, that sounds almost suicidal for a CEO in that kind of situation. What was the feeling in the room when he put that up? Was it like audible gasping or just stunned silence?
Yeah, the engineer described it as a moment where you could almost hear a collective intake of breath. Definitely stunned silence. For 20 minutes, David didn't just acknowledge the failure. He meticulously dissected his personal contributions to it. He spoke really candidly about his own miscalculations, his overly optimistic assumptions about market timing, and maybe most importantly, his fear. His fear of admitting they were behind schedule, of speaking up about the mounting challenges. He laid bare his own low valley moment for everyone to see, not as an excuse, but as a roadmap of his own errors. The engineer described an immediate, almost miraculous shift in the room's atmosphere. That palpable fear didn't just lessen, it completely evaporated. It was replaced by this profound sense of shared purpose and, strangely, relief. And then something truly transformative happened. People started speaking up. But it wasn't to point fingers or assign blame. It was to add their own pieces to the puzzle, taking ownership of their own missteps. One person admitted, "I was too scared to mention the bug in the core code because I thought it would delay the launch." Another confessed, "I pushed a feature I knew wasn't ready because I felt the pressure." This act of raw, honest vulnerability from David created this psychological safety that the team desperately needed to be brutally honest with each other. Now, they didn't save the original product. That ship had sailed. But this candid exchange, fueled by their CEO's leadership, it saved the company. They pivoted. They built something entirely new from the wreckage. And this time, they did it with a level of honesty and transparency that made them faster and stronger than they had ever been before. This story is just such a powerful testament to the idea that a leader's true strength isn't found in their infallibility, but in their humanity. Their willingness to show their own struggles gives their team permission to be truly resilient and innovative.
So it wasn't just about David feeling better or even about being a nice guy. This created something tangible, something real for the company. What exactly is psychological safety then? Because it sounds like it's definitely more than just, a pleasant atmosphere.
It's precisely that. It's much more foundational. Think of psychological safety as creating a workplace where it's genuinely safe to take a risk, safe to speak up, ask a stupid question, challenge the status quo, or, importantly, admit a mistake without fearing you'll be shamed, punished, or sidelined. It's essentially the air cover needed for innovation and honest communication. It means employees feel comfortable and confident enough to express their ideas, thoughts, and concerns without worrying about negative repercussions. This concept has gained a lot of recognition because of its profound impact on team dynamics and individual well-being. Research consistently shows that psychological safety predicts positive outcomes. We're talking increased employee engagement, reduced turnover intentions, better team performance, enhanced collaboration. The list goes on. In essence, fostering this kind of environment can truly unlock the full potential of your workforce. People feel at ease expressing themselves, taking initiative, and that naturally leads to increased motivation and better overall performance. Now, working alongside psychological safety is team trust. This is slightly different. It refers more to a shared perception among team members about each other's integrity, reliability, and competence. Are they going to do what they say? Can I count on them? In high-pressure environments, like the IT sector we mentioned, team trust is absolutely crucial for unity and effective collaboration. When trust is present, it significantly reduces uncertainty and vulnerability among members. It allows them to focus intently on their tasks without that constant background fear of being undermined or judged by their colleagues. This sense of security is what truly fosters a collaborative environment where people feel comfortable sharing ideas, seeking constructive feedback, and working together toward common goals. Trust, in this context, allows for a reduction in that feeling of vulnerability and uncertainty, which is paramount when rapid innovation and problem-solving are, like daily requirements. Okay, here's where the interplay gets particularly interesting, especially when we think about work motivation, maybe specifically in the IT sector. While psychological safety is undeniably important for fostering team learning and collaboration, its direct link to individual work motivation might not be as strong as you'd intuitively think. Instead, research suggests that the benefits of psychological safety on motivation are most effective when that safety actively leads to the development of trust within the team. So trust in this dynamic acts as the crucial mediator. It's like the bridge that translates the feeling of safety into tangible boosts in an employee's drive and dedication. The practical implications for leaders here are pretty profound. First, managers should prioritize creating psychologically safe environments. That's foundational. But then they must actively build and sustain trust within their teams. And this isn't a passive thing. It involves concrete actions. Leaders can use targeted team-building activities, both formal and informal, that encourage personal sharing and collective problem-solving. They absolutely must consistently promote open and honest communication, ensuring feedback flows freely and constructively, without fear of reprisal. And critically, they need effective methods for conflict resolution. Addressing disagreements in a way that actually strengthens, rather than erodes, trust is key. By doing all this, leaders foster a supportive and trusting work environment that directly leads to higher employee motivation and ultimately superior organizational performance.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. So the powerful takeaway isn't just about being nice or creating a pleasant atmosphere. It's a fundamental re-engineering of how teams work. It's about building a human system where transparency isn't a bug. It's actually the feature that drives rapid problem solving, real innovation, and true resilience. It sounds like you're saying that the courage to be vulnerable, especially from the top, fundamentally changes how a team functions and succeeds. We've seen how vulnerability, whether it's an individual sharing a struggle on social media or a CEO admitting fault, can create psychological safety and foster trust. It's about embracing the messy middle as adults. But what if we could start earlier? What if fostering this kind of resilience and comfort with imperfection began not just in the corporate world, but right in the classroom? Can we actually instill this comfort with imperfection right from childhood?
That's precisely where another really powerful story comes into play. It illustrates a brilliant teaching approach to embracing failure. It comes from a Canadian middle school teacher. Let's call her Mrs. Anya. She noticed this really troubling trend in her science class. Her bright, capable students were terrified of being wrong, absolutely terrified. They would only propose hypotheses they were totally sure were correct, or build volcanoes they knew would erupt perfectly. The natural creativity and risk-taking were just being stifled, replaced by this deep fear of imperfection and this desire to only present perfect results. So Mrs. Anya decided to try an experiment. She introduced a new monthly project she called the Fantastic Flop. The explicit goal of this project was not to succeed. Weird, right? Instead, students were challenged to attempt something ambitious, maybe build a perpetual motion machine, or create a self-sustaining ecosystem, something tricky. And then they had to meticulously document the process of its failure in something called a flop folio. The grade wasn't based on the outcome of their ambitious attempt, but rather on the quality of their analysis, what went wrong, the thinking behind their choices, and crucially, what they learned from it. It was all about the journey, not the flawless destination.
Wow, that sounds like a complete nightmare for a perfectionist student. I can just imagine the anxiety attacks. Were there kids who really struggled with the idea of intentionally trying something and expecting it to flop? How did Miss Anya even convince them it was okay?
Oh, absolutely. There was definitely initial confusion, and yeah, some students were kind of paralyzed by the concept at first. Mrs. Anya had to explicitly model it. She shared her own past flops in teaching and what she learned from them. She framed it as scientific exploration. You experiment, you observe, you learn. It's part of the process. And then, a boy named Liam presented his project. It was an attempt to build a miniature self-sustaining ecosystem in a jar. By his own admission, it had evolved into this smelly, swampy mess. He stood at the front of the class, though, with this huge grin, not a hint of shame. And he explained his flawed understanding of oxygen cycles and bacterial decay. He detailed his research, his many failed attempts to fix it, and articulated exactly what he would do differently next time. The class was totally captivated. They applauded really loudly, not because his ecosystem was a success, it clearly wasn't, but because his failure was so interesting and his learning was so clear. He literally said, "It was a fantastic flop, and I learned more from this mess than I ever did from something that just worked." Pretty soon, the Fantastic Flop became the most popular project in Ms. Anya's class. This simple, yet kind of revolutionary teaching approach profoundly shifted the classroom culture. It transformed from an environment of fear into one of curiosity and courage. Students started taking bigger risks in all their work, knowing that even in failure, there's this celebrated opportunity for growth. It teaches such a fundamental truth. Our stumbles and our flops, they aren't endpoints. They are, in fact, the most valuable parts of our journey. They shape us into more thoughtful, persistent, and ultimately more successful human beings. It's like a blueprint for cultivating true resilience by celebrating the struggle just as much as the solution. And this approach is deeply rooted in the concept of a growth mindset. At its core, a growth mindset is the belief that intelligence and abilities aren't fixed traits. They're malleable qualities that can be developed through effort, hard work, diligent practice, applying good strategies, and also getting valuable input from others. This stands in stark contrast to a fixed mindset, where abilities are seen as innate and unalterable. You either have it or you don't. Now, it's important to understand that people rarely hold an exclusively fixed or exclusively growth mindset in all circumstances. It's really more of a continuum. You might have a growth mindset about your athletic ability, for instance, believing you can always improve your sprint time, but maybe a fixed mindset about your artistic talent, thinking you're just not creative. These beliefs can vary a lot depending on the specific context or the skill area.
So why does this concept of a growth mindset matter so much, particularly in education, but maybe beyond that too? It sounds like it's about more than just helping kids get better grades.
It absolutely is, because students interpret their entire environment through the lens of their beliefs and perceptions. And these beliefs, they're shaped by their experiences and critically by the cues they get through interactions with everyone around them: parents, teachers, coaches, mentors, peers. When students operate with a fixed mindset, everyday classroom experiences can feel threatening. They feel indicative of some deficit in their ability. So a challenging math problem isn't seen as an opportunity to learn, but as confirmation that they're just not good at math. However, when they adopt a growth mindset, these same experiences become exciting. They're seen as indicative of a potential for development. That difficult math problem, it becomes a chance to grow their brain, to strengthen new neural pathways. And the benefits of a growth mindset for student learning and outcomes are pretty significant. Students with a growth mindset tend to have more positive attitudes toward school overall. That's a big one. They exhibit higher academic confidence and generally report better psychological well-being. This mindset translates into increased motivation and greater engagement in school activities. And crucially, it fosters higher academic resilience and persistence. That means they're more likely to persevere when things get tough, rather than just giving up. Beyond these individual benefits, growth mindset thinking can powerfully counteract the negative effects of stereotypes, which is huge. For instance, it's been shown to lessen the impact of stereotype threats. The harmful ideas that suggest certain groups aren't smart or that women aren't good at math and science. By believing that abilities can be developed through effort, students are less likely to internalize these damaging stereotypes and more likely to thrive, seeing their potential as basically limitless. However, there's a nuance here that's worth exploring. It adds a layer of complexity. Even students with a growth mindset might still engage in what's called self-handicapping behaviors. These are things like procrastinating, pulling an all-nighter right before an exam, or listening to distracting music while studying. They do this almost paradoxically to protect their self-esteem, especially if their self-worth is really tightly tied to academic success. If they perform poorly, they can then blame the circumstances. Oh, I didn't study enough, I was tired, that music was too loud, rather than blaming a lack of innate ability. But here's the kicker. If they're in a situation where they can't self-handicap, maybe the test was a surprise and they still fail. They might paradoxically attribute that failure to a lack of innate ability and experience lower self-esteem, even with their underlying growth mindset. It's like their brain is trying to protect them, but the strategy kind of backfires.
So it's not a magic bullet then. Even if you believe you can grow, your self-worth can still get tangled up in it, tricking you into these protective but ultimately unhelpful behaviors.
Exactly. It really highlights the intricate interplay of all the messages students receive, the internal narratives they build, and just how deep-seated these beliefs can be. It's not a simple on-off switch. It's a dynamic system. Yeah. And this brings us to how growth mindset, metacognition, and academic resilience all work together. Look, failure, setbacks, mistakes. They're an inevitable and natural part of school and learning. How students respond adaptively to the stress of these setbacks relies on a combination of things. First, it requires growth mindset thinking about that core belief that they can improve. Second, it involves metacognitive skills. That's basically thinking about your own thinking. It's the ability to step back, observe how you're learning, what strategies you're using, and figure out if they're working. Like having an internal coach guiding your learning process. And third, it demands academic resilience, that capacity to persevere with confidence, composure, and control, even when things are really tough. When teachers model a growth mindset in the face of their own setbacks and learning challenges, they illustrate a crucial self-regulatory process. That underpins the academic resilience students need in their own lives. Recognizing your own fixed mindset dialogue and actively adjusting to make room for growth mindset thinking. That is a metacognitive process, and it truly sets the stage for academic resilience.
So what does this all mean? It means shifting our internal narrative and the narratives around us to truly see every stumble, every flop, not just as a moment of frustration, but as like a strategic data point, an invitation to pivot, and ultimately the fuel for genuine growth. Seeing every stumble as a step forward, that's a powerful shift in perspective, isn't it? Going from individuals hiding their struggles to leaders embracing their mistakes to students learning from their flops. The big question now is, okay, how do we actively cultivate this mindset in ourselves and the people around us, whether that's in the classroom, at home, or maybe even at work? How do we actually put this into practice?
Right, that's the crucial next step. We've kind of identified the problem and seen the potential of a different approach. Now let's explore some actionable strategies, drawing from research across these different contexts, to foster this growth mindset for basically everyone. So for schools and teachers, the foundational idea really is to emphasize effort and improvement over just innate ability. This is where the language we use becomes incredibly powerful. Instead of telling a student, "You're so smart," which focuses on fixed intelligence, the praise should be something like, "Wow, you worked really hard on that assignment," or "I'm proud of you for trying more than one strategy when you got stuck." This kind of process-oriented praise focuses student attention on academic mastery, on the learning itself, rather than just performance or grades. And this shift, it results in improved student attitudes, better learning outcomes, increased engagement, and better academic performance overall. It's particularly important, research shows, for female and minority students, as it helps counteract those negative stereotypes that might otherwise limit their perceived potential. Another key strategy is to frame mistakes as vital learning opportunities. Teachers should explicitly teach that struggle is natural, that it's okay, and that mistakes are actually vital for learning. This includes creating a classroom where students feel genuinely safe correcting errors and revising their work for mastery, not just aiming for a certain grade. It helps propel students to focus on understanding concepts deeply rather than just getting high scores. Even in things like parent-teacher conferences, the focus can be shifted. Instead of just talking about performance, talk about effort, talk about learning from mistakes. Maybe the student could even lead the conference, presenting evidence of their improvement journey. And critically, teachers should model growth mindset thinking themselves. This means openly discussing the mistakes or struggles they have experienced, both personally and professionally, and sharing their own mindset thinking related to these challenges. When a teacher talks about how they struggle with a particular skill, maybe learning new software, or even how they messed up planning a lesson and what they learned from it, it normalizes struggle. It helps create that safe environment for students to share their own difficulties. It shows students that it's okay to struggle, and that persistence pays off for everyone, even their teachers. Beyond modeling, using growth mindset language is essential, just woven into the fabric of the school day. Teachers should consistently use that process-oriented praise we talked about, focusing on effort, persistence, strategies used, not just ability. A really powerful technique is to embrace the word yet. Instead of saying, you didn't master this, say you haven't mastered this yet. That simple addition implies future mastery is possible with continued effort. Posting growth mindset quotes, encouraging students to rephrase fixed mindset statements. These are also effective, like transforming I can't do this into I can't do this yet, but I can learn. And finally, teachers can structure learning tasks to support growth mindset. This involves designing open-ended projects that allow for multiple correct answers and approaches, celebrating diverse thinking. Incorporating goal setting and reflection, maybe through journaling, helps students monitor their own progress, analyze their errors, and plan their next steps. Teachers can provide reflection prompts like, what mistakes did I make and what did I learn? Or what new strategies did I try today that helped me? Encouraging students to keep success folders, where they store artifacts of successful learning that came from effort and persistence, like a tough math problem they finally solved, or a revised essay that got much better, can also boost their confidence during frustrating moments, reminding them of their own journey.
Imagine having a fantastic flop day at work, right? And your boss actually says, hey, let's unpack what you learned from this because that's where the real juice is. It would completely change the dynamic, wouldn't it? It just moves away from that fear of failure towards celebrating learning and insight.
It truly would. Now, for families and parents, a lot of these same principles apply directly. They shape the earliest narratives children form about themselves and their abilities. One of the best strategies parents can use is to model growth mindset thinking themselves. Often, parents unconsciously use language about their own abilities that suggests skills are fixed. Saying, oh, I can't cook, or I'm terrible at anything technical. Instead, modeling a growth mindset means saying things like, I'm going to take a cooking class to improve this skill, or I need more practice and guidance with this new app. Parents should also openly share their personal mistakes and what they learned from them, showing children that mistakes are a natural part of the learning process, not some sign of inadequacy. Learning something new as a parent and letting your child see you struggle, persevere, and eventually improve. That's an incredibly powerful lesson. It speaks volumes without a single lecture.
I remember when I tried to build a particularly complicated piece of flat pack furniture the other day. I just kept trying to force pieces together in ways that clearly weren't meant to go, getting more and more frustrated. I was absolutely convinced I was just bad at assembly and had some innate deficiency in spatial reasoning. My partner, thankfully, suggested I just walk away, look at the instructions from a completely different angle, and try again later. It was definitely a messy, frustrating middle, but eventually, with a lot of trying again and shifting my strategy, I got it done. It's so true how much we resist that messy process, even as adults.
That's a perfect example of what it looks like in practice, that internal dialogue we all face, right? And just like teachers, parents should praise for process, not just the outcome. Instead of, you're so smart, say, your hard work really paid off on that project, or I'm so impressed by how you kept trying different ways until you solved that problem. This links effort directly to success and helps foster that growth mindset. praising persistence, rising to a challenge, using creative strategies. These are all excellent examples of process-oriented praise. Research shows parents who view failure as a helpful part of learning are more likely to nurture a growth mindset in their kids. And this leads to less homework-related conflict and less controlling behavior around academic performance. Parents should also try to discuss learning with their children daily. Ask questions like, what did you learn today that was surprising? What mistake did you make that taught you something really important? Or what did you try hard at today, even if it was difficult? And it's vital for parents to share their own answers to these questions too. Remember, growth mindset isn't just about school stuff. It applies to sports, music, art, social skills, everything. Encourage children to discuss their learning and next steps for improvement in all these areas. Also, it's really important to discourage comparison and envy of peers. When a child compares themselves to others, parents can gently reframe it by saying something like, wow, she must have practiced a lot to get that good, or what might you do to improve your skill in this area? This helps kids realize that everyone puts an effort to develop skills. And finally, parents really need to encourage risk-taking and learning from mistakes. I know it's difficult to watch your kids struggle, but allowing them to try difficult tasks and even fail sometimes teaches crucial life lessons and builds resilience. Success after failure teaches the importance of effort and perseverance. Celebrate their effort and help them highlight the lessons learned through the failure. Sharing stories of famous people, inventors, artists, athletes who failed repeatedly but persevered can also be highly motivating. It provides powerful examples of that messy middle in action. And this leads us to strategies for individuals. Whether you're a student, a parent, or just anyone looking to cultivate a growth mindset in yourself, Carol Dweck, who's a leading researcher in this field, outlines a practical 4-step process to change your mindset. The key here is developing some pretty profound self-awareness. Step 1. Hear your fixed mindset dialogue. This is about identifying the situations that trigger those feelings of threat or defensiveness inside you. That inner critic often says things like, I'm just not good at math, or this is too hard for me. Maybe, it's not my fault, I just don't have the talent for this. Common triggers, having to work hard, facing setbacks, getting negative feedback, being challenged, or even seeing others succeed seemingly effortlessly. You need to learn to listen for that voice, recognize its patterns, and kind of call it out. Step 2, recognize you have a choice. Okay, so once you hear that fixed mindset voice, you realize you don't have to be a slave to it. You can either accept it and let it dictate your actions, which usually leads to giving up, or you can challenge it.
You can choose to see that voice as a signal that you need to push yourself, increase your effort, maybe change your strategies, and just continue to develop. This moment of choice is actually incredibly empowering. Step 3, respond with growth mindset thinking. This is where you actively talk back to that inner critic. If your fixed mindset says, are you sure you can do it? I told you it was too risky. You're going to embarrass yourself. You respond with a new script. You might tell yourself something like, well, I'm not sure I can do it now, but I can learn with time and effort, and I'll definitely learn something valuable, even if I don't achieve exactly what I set out to. Or maybe, most successful people have failures along the way. This is just part of the process. Journaling can be a great tool here, helping you identify common patterns in your negative thoughts and practice these growth-oriented responses. You're essentially rewriting your internal script. Step 4, take growth mindset action. Your growth mindset response should then directly guide your next steps, propelling you forward. This might mean accepting the challenge you initially shied away from,
Or learning from your failures instead of dwelling on them, or adjusting your strategies based on critical feedback and trying again with renewed determination. This internal process is a powerful metacognitive strategy, and you can apply it in pretty much any area of your life, from learning a new hobby to tackling a complex work project. Finally, a simple but powerful strategy for everyone is to maybe rebrand the word fail. For most people, fail carries such heavy negative connotations. It conjures up images of defeat, finality. We could instead replace it with a positive acronym, something like FAIL, standing for First Attempt in Learning, or maybe finding an important lesson. This simple reframe can fundamentally alter how we perceive setbacks. It encourages us to see them not as endpoints, but as integral, informative steps on the path to mastery and success. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it seems pretty clear that fostering a growth mindset and truly embracing vulnerability, well, it isn't a simple single intervention, is it? It really requires a comprehensive systems-level approach. It needs engagement from leaders, teachers, parents, and individuals alike. And while the complexity of changing these deeply ingrained beliefs and societal norms can feel daunting, the research strongly suggests that consistent, Comprehensive efforts across its entire community of support can lead to really substantial long-term benefits. Benefits in motivation, resilience, and overall well-being. It's fundamentally about building a collective understanding that our struggles are not something to hide away in shame, but rather foundational elements of our growth.
Absolutely. It circled right back to my friend, doesn't it? To that apologetic tone in her voice when she spoke about the difficult years that led to her success. Perhaps what we truly need is to develop a new vocabulary, a new common language for discussing the journey itself. One that doesn't just celebrate the arrival, but actually reveres the winding, uncertain road, the detours, and even those moments of feeling completely lost. What if the greatest stories aren't just about reaching the summit, but about the grit, the grace, and maybe even the goofy missteps taken on the steepest slopes? What if the truly inspiring narrative isn't the victory lap, but the messy, beautiful, and utterly human journey that made it possible?